Welcome everybody to join to our lunch and learn on the American Indian Heritage Commission Oral History Project. I'm John Horan, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more. But first, let's hear from Carrie Bird.
Hi, my name is Curry Bird. I am a citizen of the Sisseton-Wahpeton Oyate tribe in Sisseton, South Dakota. I am also of Lumbee heritage, having grown up in Robeson County. I am the inaugural director of the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission. So welcome today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Quinn Godwin. I'm the Associate Director of the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission, and I'm a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Micaiah Locklear, and I work as the oral historian with the American Indian Heritage Commission, and I'm a citizen of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. I'm so glad that you're here today to be with us.
All right, and I am John Horan, as I said, the oral historian and podcast host for the State Archives of North Carolina. And speaking of a podcast, oh, there we go. Check out Connecting the Docs. It's on your screen now with the QR code. It is the podcast for the State Archives. We just released another episode in our World War II series just today. In fact, 3 minutes ago, it released. This one is on rationing with a highlight on some of interesting recipes that came out in that time of need during World War II. And shameless plug aside, as the oral historian, I am responsible for gathering and preserving the story of North Carolina as told by North Carolinians with their own voices. I collect oral histories for projects that we create within the archives, but I also work with community partners, including those within DNCR. One such project, of course, is the subject of today's talk, the American Indian Heritage Commission Oral History Project. And first, I thought we would talk about the origins of the project. We wanted to make sure we gathered information on several key points. We wanted to talk to folks about the communities they grew up in and how they developed over time. Particularly interesting was the relationship between American Indian identity and community. We sought to find out how pride of community and heritage changed during interviews' lives. Of course, it wasn't all easy, as we'll show in this presentation. There was a lot of internal and external adversity to overcome. But throughout the process, I wanted to make sure we stick to best practices in oral history, including preservation and access. We wanted to make sure the rich narratives were preserved while also maintaining research integrity across the whole project. And with that, we developed a set of questions that could be molded to fit the whole project while also including sections on individual tribes and then making sure personal stories came through. And with that, I'll let Curry discuss the origins of the project on his side.
Sure. So the American Indian Heritage Commission was established in 2021 by the General Assembly and Governor Roy Cooper. Quinn and myself were hired as director and associate director in July of 2022 when we started our work. We are advised by a 12-member commission made up of representatives from our 8 state-recognized tribes and our 4 urban Indian organizations. And they help guide us through our work and endorse our work and then carry it out to the tribal communities. The Oral History Project was one of our first initiatives and one I'm probably most proud of. It's capturing the story of significant individuals and tribal community members who have a rich story to tell about their lived experiences and helping to basically document those experiences for those in the future who may want to know more about the Lumbee Indian or Indian people of North Carolina as they existed in 2025 and some of the experiences they had throughout their lives. We are very fortunate to be gathering these stories. And as an example of why they're so important, we've actually, unfortunately, have had 4 of those individuals we've interviewed have passed since we started the project in 2023. So that's why it's so important for us to capture these stories and share their stories with the individuals who are listening to the stories now, as well as into the future. I am assisted by 2 staff members. Quinn Godwin is our associate director, and Micaiah Locklear, who serves as our state oral historian or our oral historian for the American Indian Heritage Project. And they're doing a great job in helping us to identify individuals. Our commissioners also recommend individuals we'd like to see interviewed and their stories captured. And so I'm glad you can join us today. I think it's a very exciting project, and I look forward to sharing more with you as you go through the program. Thank you.
Hi again, everybody. Just to follow up on what Curry was saying, our oral history program is one of the Commission's most important preservation initiatives. It's designed to ensure that our voices, the voices of North Carolina's tribal citizens, are recorded and preserved in their own words. And that's really important. You get the audio and the visual with that. So they'll be preserved for future generations to learn from and to view. This work directly supports our 2025-2030 strategic plan, which calls for the creation of a statewide digital archive of oral histories and partnerships that preserve and elevate Native perspectives in North Carolina's history. So I want to talk about two big expansions that we had for our oral history program. In 2024, we applied for and received a 3-year grant from the National Archives, National Historical Publications and Records Commission to launch this effort. This is actually what allowed us to hire Micaiah, our oral historian. And with that support, we're collecting 144 oral histories over the life of the grant. And that's going to represent all 8 state recognized tribes and the 4 urban Indian organizations. So each interview will be permanently housed and made accessible through the State Archives of North Carolina, following national standards that were provided by from NARA for description, metadata, and accessibility. So not only are we recording it, but on the back end, there's a lot of transcription, keyword searches, things like that that have helped us really get that information out there. So I really want to take a moment to recognize John, and she's not on here, but his assistant, Annabeth Poe. They've been incredible partners in this work. They're deeply dedicated to the mission of preserving and sharing Indigenous stories, and they do that with such care and integrity. So we really appreciate them. The second grant that we received earlier this year, we applied for and received a $10,000 grant from the Catawba Foundation. Now, the Catawbas are a South Carolina federally recognized tribes, but their traditional territories are here in the state. So that funding allows us to expand the program even further by purchasing additional recording equipment, improving transcription services, and supporting travel so we can reach more communities across the state. So in closing, together, these grants are helping us build a lasting infrastructure for preserving Native voices and stories. So thank you very much.
And don't forget, this QR code sends you straight to their website where you can take a look and find a toolkit that you just recently published. Is that right, Quinn?
That's right. And for the past 3 years, we've been publishing an American Indian Heritage Month toolkit. And that's distributed all over the state, especially to educators. And in that, you'll find information about all of the state tribes, all of the urban Indian organizations. There'll be links to events, Native American art galleries in the state. There's even a Spotify playlist with North Carolina Native artists. So we would really like for you to take a look at that. And now I'll post that direct link in the chat.
All right. Appreciate it. And then, so let's go here. So I'm happy to say that all the individuals included in the collection have touched upon at least one of these themes that we've got going on here. But it is just a sampling of what we've discussed in the interviews. And of course, we could tell you what we've learned from all of these, but we'd rather show you with clips from several oral histories. And then we'll talk about the future of the project. And of course, at the end, we'll open it up to questions where we'll invite a discussion on what we've presented and the project as a whole. So education was a key topic that nearly all interviewees touched upon. The first 2 interviewees, along with other students from the Coharie tribe of Harnett County, were bused to the East Carolina Indian School in Sampson County during school segregation, a journey that routinely took over an hour each way. Students and parents frustrated with this system led sit-ins at nearby but white Dunn High School. First, we have Juanita Caldwell and her recollections of those fateful days.
The first time around was very frightening. You think about, maybe not even 10 children were in there. Daddy and Uncle Jim were not allowed to be around us because Daddy had been arrested and Uncle Jim had been arrested. And Uncle Jim had been arrested for trespassing. They said he was trespassing on Dunn property. I don't remember him doing that, but he might have stepped over the line. But I remember the first day was the most frightening day of my life, or one of the most frightening ones. Uh, to see small children, and I will say that we were children then, uh, lined up to step across from the sidewalk to the property, and big men in front of you with guns and everything, and you don't know what's going to happen. It never, I guess we were all stupid. I never thought of anybody hurting me. Now, I did at one time later on, but when that was beginning, I didn't, because it frightened me a little bit, but not to think that somebody would literally hurt me. Now, one morning I was getting ready to go, and Daddy, we knew we were going, and we knew what we were going to do. Everybody says, what did your daddy tell you? Daddy didn't have to tell us anything. I knew that I would, but I was going to cross that line if there was an opportunity, and I knew that I was going to do it because Daddy said so, and that was just the way it was, you know. And they said, "Didn't he tell you to do this?" No, he didn't. Uh, we just knew that the plan was for us to get in that school, and Gene and I got in there, but it was a long time coming, you know.
So we also have Huey Maynor and his recollections of those events.
I finished Maple Grove School, and when we went to Dunn High School to do the sit-ins and all, and we all got arrested a time or two and carried to Littleton because of trespassing on school property. They told us not to, but we were determined, so we did anyway. And nobody really got into any serious trouble. No jail time, nothing like that. And the kids, they'd take us up there, and the judge would tell them to bring us back. And so that's sort of the way that went. But things up there at Dunn High School, it was sort of really a little scary, because when you walked in there to do you sit in, you didn't really know what to expect. You didn't know who was going to be friendly and who was going to be hateful towards you. But I was sort of lucky, because a few of the kids I knew from working on the farms and delivering newspapers and little odd jobs and things like that. And I would go to one room, and the other, Juanita and Imogen and them, they'd go to another room. There was different people in these rooms, and some of the kids, well, I'd say 80 to 85% of them, they wasn't mean to us or anything like that, or not to me. But then there was a few, that would say ugly things to you, call you the N-word and half-breed and stuff like that. And we tried to just pass it off and not cause any problem. But the teachers, I think they were told just to ignore us and pretend we're not there, because none of them ever said anything really, not to me. But like I say, it was sort of scary when you went in not knowing what to expect. But it helped when you out of all those kids, you see somebody that you knew, and they'd sort of smile at you, and that would sort of make you feel a little more comfortable. But still, you knew there were so many more that might not feel that way. But I think it was mostly the parents of the kids that was pushing all this stuff, along with the school board. They were the ones that voted to keep us out.
So, in both instances, these were children standing up to adverse conditions. They were following the lead of their elders and fighting for equality in education. Of course, due to the actions of Caldwell and Maynor and others, Dunn High School desegregated. Continuing efforts in recognizing this event have been commemorated by a highway marker dedicated just this year. We've also spoken with some trailblazers in the medical field. Our second interview for the project entirely was with Dr. Otis Lowry. We learned about how Dr. Lowry grew up, how he worked in an American Victory shipyard as a welder during World War II, and how he saw President Franklin Roosevelt give a speech. We learned about how he loved his family and particularly his wife. But what I want to highlight here is a clip about his efforts to get into med school.
So we saved up right much money, and I applied to med school that year. And that year, I got called for an interview at University of North Carolina, which surprised me. And so I drove down, and I was interviewed by all the members of the committee, and all of them, except one, told me that I was well qualified. Well, first of all, each of them, what we talked about was the Indian situation in Pembroke. That was the big subject. But anyway, they all ended up telling me that I was well qualified to study medicine and that they were going to vote to admit me. Well, I felt sure that I was in med. Went back and I told my wife I was surely that I was going to be admitted because they had told me that. Well, a few weeks later, I got a letter from the Dr. Hedgepeth, who was head of the committee, telling me I was rejected again. So I shot off a pretty heavy letter to them and demanding to know why I was rejected, and telling them. But in any event, I got a letter back from the dean, and he said that I was right, that the committee voted to admit me to med school, but when it came to his desk, he had to reject it, and he didn't tell me why. The committee had voted to admit me, and he didn't tell me why. So my first thought was to bring suit against the university, and then I thought again. I said, no, that's not the right thing to do. Just accept it for what it was and go ahead and give up on medicine and take my losses there and go into education. So I applied to the University of Virginia and was accepted there in the School of Education, and I got my master's degree there in school administration. And the month before I was getting my degree, I got a letter from the dean at the University of North Carolina Med School telling me that there was a vacancy for the class of 52 if I still wanted to go to med school. That was certainly a big surprise to get that letter from the dean telling me that. And by the way, when I got to med school, I found out early after I got there that a black student had been admitted to the medical school in '51, the last year that I was rejected. Dr. Diggs was his name. and that Floyd McKissick was admitted to the law school the same year, and that they both got in by suing the university. And so that's probably what, well, I'm sure that's what it opened it up for me, uh, that I was able to get in.
So we may have that letter. We may not have the letter that he references from the dean, but we certainly do have the personal account now as a result of this interview from Dr. Lowry, documenting his trials and achieving his dream of becoming a doctor as what he calls an Indian from Robeson County in the state of North Carolina. Continuing on the theme of medicine, we talked to Dr. Joseph Bell on his work in pediatrics. Like Dr. Lowry, Dr. Bell is a pioneer. He is the first American Indian from North Carolina to enter the field of pediatrics. Furthermore, he did it at Dr. Lowry's alma mater at UNC Chapel Hill. Here we have him reflecting on why 30 years elapsed between Dr. Lowry's experience in 1956 and his own in 1986.
You know, if you think about 56, I mean, if you go back to people like Dr. Lowry or folks like Dr. Jim Jones or Lonnie Revels or people who went out and got degrees from different universities years ago, they were like pioneers. I mean, those are folks who are like, there's nobody blazing the trail for you. You're just going to have to go do it, right? And I think probably some of that momentum, you know, kind of through the years began to peak up, you know, get more, you know, like more and more folks seeing that, hey, you know, if that person can do it, I can do it. You know, it's just that there were just not many people going into to pediatrics of those Native people. So it was a small group, but then most of those folks went into like family practice or adult medicine. Probably like a lot of folks, like, okay, that's the need. That's where the need is, right? And not everybody's meant to be pediatricians, you know? So it just so happened that I was in the early group, but wanted to do something besides adult medicine. So I think that's why you got that gap. Now, by the time I started medical school in 1982 at UNC, you know, they were beginning to have one or two Native medical students getting every year. So if you think about it, in 4-year medical school class, there were probably at least 8 of us. That's a pretty good number. Right? I mean, and unfortunately, it's a number that's dropped off of all things, not picked up, it's dropped off. But it took a long time, you know, to get to those numbers. You know, people feeling like they had the resources and the confidence to go to medical school, and then actually apply and get into medical school. I mean, that's just a gradual process. So I just happened to be in the first part of that.
Now, sadly, both individuals have since passed since doing these interviews. Of course, their memories live on with their loved ones, but they do also live on at the state archives for us to learn from and hear and listen about. So in addition to the adversity faced in education, we have plenty of stories of adults overcoming major obstacles. Executive Director of the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs and Hallowasaponi, Gregory Richardson, relates a story of his trials during his return from the Vietnam War.
Coming back from Vietnam, I processed out of Presidio, California, which is a Army processing unit, put on a plane to Atlanta, and we didn't have phones at home. So I had to call my aunt and uncle's house up the road to get a message to my parents. And Dad was working in Baltimore. So got a message to my mother that I'm landing in Raleigh. And my first cousin was home. She was in school and she was very young. But they had a phone. My uncle was in the Navy, so they had a phone, Uncle Purcell in Rowena. And so Cheryl I said, Cheryl, write this down now. We're going to be flying from California to Atlanta. We're going to be in Raleigh like at 9 o'clock in the morning, because I flew overnight and then from Atlanta right up to Raleigh. The idea was I was trying to get a message to my mom through Cheryl that come on up to Raleigh, like at 9 or 10 o'clock and pick me up. Well, she thought it was 9 o'clock at night. So I get to Raleigh, Durham, and nobody's there. Thinking, wow, no phone at home, can't get to anybody, at my uncle's house. Cheryl was at school during the day, couldn't get up with her, so I'm stuck at RDU. So I'm figuring, well, just rent me a car, and I'll be home in an hour, a couple hours. So I go around to the counter. No, they won't rent me a car. You have to be a certain rank to rent a car. So I've been halfway around the world in Vietnam coming home, and I can't even rent a car to get home. Mad, probably as upset as I've ever been. Never confronted with such anger displayed. I was taking it out on the poor folks at the counter, I'm sure. But then over time, I just have to say, well, can't get a car, so I'm stuck at RDU. So I'm, hanging out, still trying that number, thinking maybe, Cheryl get home from school early, or trying to think of who else I could call. We didn't have a lot of people at home that had phones. So you're stuck, My uncle, he was in the Navy, so they had a phone. So I guess it was, 3 or 4 o'clock in the evening. I get up with Cheryl, keep calling. And Cheryl gets on a bicycle and goes, because we live right down the road, and goes down to the house and tells Mom that Greg is at the airport in Raleigh and he's waiting for y'all to come get him, So Dad's away working in Baltimore, so she goes and gets my uncle to ride with her and my sister Sheila to RDU to get me. So I'm up there not knowing what's going on, and finally they get up there, and so made it home. That was a weird situation. I don't think I've ever been so mad in my life. I've been in Vietnam, and they won't rent me a car so I can get home from Raleigh.
Now, not all of the stories are about fighting through troubles. Some stories uphold rich culture preserved through the arts. For our next interview, we spoke to Herman Oxendine. He and his late wife, Loretta, became famous for their work in the arts, gaining national recognition for his pottery and her pine needle baskets. Listen as Herman discusses a touching story of basket making.
Loretta, the first, go back to the first powwow we did at the fairground in Lumberton in 1995. It was some of her students come by that she taught at Piney Grove School, and there's one come by and he had got married and had started a family, and he come by and saw Mama's basket. He said, "I still got my basket." Still got my basket. I made it Piney Grove School. He still had his basket. He took a week to make a small basket, just a basket, no top, no lid or anything. But Loretta told the children, told them that Friday. It said, if you'll bring some pine needles and thread and needle, Monday we'll make a pine needle basket. And so they all had robbed Mama's thread baskets and needles and stuff, and they started on Monday. They had a break time during a class. At that time they had a while to do some kind of art or whatever, and they had that time to work on a basket. And by Friday they had them a little basket. And the young man had come up that day at our first powwow, there at the powwow. He come by and I still, I still got my basket that we made, and that was that the kind of thrilled Mama to know that he still had his basket.
So we did this interview as part of a collaboration with the North Carolina Arts Council to commemorate the Oxendines receiving the North Carolina Heritage Award. So for the last clip today, I wanted to relate a story that shows the interconnectedness that all these stories exhibit with the past, but also how they influence the future. And I wanted to do so while also showing how connection between the earth and the land matters. But enough about me talking about it. Here's Marvell Welch of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee.
Back in the early, in 2000, in that era there, I took my sisters to a gathering place that we had always gathered native greens. I don't know how much you know about federal law and the national park. You cannot pick anything in the national park. This place, we have been going many, many years. I took my mother, I took my other aunties and my sisters, and that's where we'd go and gather. And we have a native green that's called Sochan. And there's another English name for it, which is about as long as my arm, but, you know, in Cherokee we call it Sochan. And so, and every Indian woman carries a knife, maybe one or two other knives, but we carry one to forage or to gather. And I had a knife in my hand, and I was picking Sochan in this hand. I had Sochan in this hand, and we were at this place that we had always gone to, and park ranger walks up. He wasn't concerned that I had a knife in this hand. He was concerned what I had in this hand. And so he cited me. And at that time, I was working for the tribe as a child therapist. and I told the chief, I said, Chief, I says, I will not pay a fine for gathering something that our people have gathered for thousands of years. I can't do it. And I says, I'm going to go to court. I am going to fight this. I may go ahead and get fined or whatever. I says, but I said, the point is, this is something that our people have done centuries long. So he agreed, and because we had to report any incident like that to our higher ups, and at that time, like I said, I was working for the tribe, and we went to federal court. We stayed in federal court for 2 years. I was fighting this, and my sister was fighting this because they charged her and cited her for the same thing. And it was foraging native plants out of the national park. And my daughter now has been on public TV talking about gathering Sochan. And we also now today have an agreement with the National Park Service that we can gather and hunt certain things in the national park without getting cited. But that was something, that was the land that was there before the National Park Service was ever there. That's where we hunted and gathered. And so to me standing up for that right has passed on to my children and to whomever else was involved in all of that. And I had total support of our tribe, our chief, and the people at that time that were in the administration. So, and it was odd that the judge, you know, he says, so you've been foraging and gathering? And at that time, it's like 50 years. And I go, yes. And so, therefore, you know, he ruled in my favor and threw all of it out.
Hello, everyone. I am Micaiah Locklear, like I said before, and I'm the oral historian with the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission. So in this role, I stepped into it back in April, and like Quinn said before, we are working towards capturing 144 oral histories over the next 3 years in the life of the grant. And at this time, we are around 30 of those interviews that have been selectively captured. So when I first came on, I was able to take a month and just dive into learning and about how to do oral histories and getting into the field and going through training. And it's one thing to say that you sit down and you hit record on a camera and just start capturing a story, but there's so much more that happens behind the scenes and in preparation for it. And so in that, John Horan and Annabeth Poe, they put me on an intensive training with learning how to work with the technology that goes behind it, and then learning how to do the metadata and do the documentation, establish the workflow that really helps this work go easily. And as we're moving forward, I started to, see how I can work to improve in this role. And so that's where now, as we're moving forward, I'm talking about how can we create supplemental resources that go along with the oral histories and the work that we do. And one of those that we're looking at as we move forward will be the incorporation of a guidebook for doing oral histories in American Indian communities. And within that guidebook, it'll talk about the trainings that you need to do, the equipment that you would use, and also provide a little bit of insight on some of these topics that have already been shared in these clips, and how do you navigate those conversations. And so some of those may include talking about segregation, integration, addiction, I mean, even abuse in these in their lives, and these are hard topics. But if you're gonna work with Native communities, you need to know how to really engage with those conversations. And so that's what this guidebook will be. And then in addition to that, we're talking about the lessons we learn along the way, which I have already had the privilege of finding out different things along that I need to improve on. So there was another time where I was at a house doing an interview, and my sound recording equipment was not working for me. And I had to start making some emergency calls and calling John, calling Quinn, Annabeth to try to get that fixed. So it's also learning how to work with your equipment and know it inside and out for those days where somebody may not answer the phone. But in addition to that, it's also how do we start bridging in our youth? So as we've said, you've already heard a lot of these stories. Some people mention pieces in their communities that I didn't know about before hearing those interviews, and like really start asking my elders, like, what was this about? Or, just started talking in community. So a big piece about bridging our youth to our elders is how do we provide them this insight? And so another piece of that will be creating like an index and some supplemental resources that tie back into the oral histories that have already been shared, and creating a way for them to have background on places that have been mentioned, names that have been shared, and even, just kind of really put in the frame of like the time periods as well. So I always like to give the example, if you're from Pembroke, you know about Cali Maze, and that was a restaurant. And so now it is known as Pammy's. It's opened up as a new restaurant. So our youth may know it as Pammy's. Some of our elders know it as Cali Maze, but it's creating this distinction that we need to also have like resources that can tie these places together at one time to build that connection. So that index will help us with that. And while also gearing in our youth to start to ask these questions. Well, did you go to Cali Maze, or what do you know about this place? And so that'll be our next approach, is engaging our youth to really start sitting down and like capturing these stories, because as you can see, there are so many that we are working to reach and try to record. And like John said, we've already had several who have passed away that we were able to capture their story, but unfortunately there are some who we were not able to capture. So how do we fill that gap? How do we come in between and still honor their legacy? And so that's another discussion that we're having on, if we going through family and talking to friends and creating another way to honor their life and still capturing their story that they left behind, and the impact of the way they moved through all the decisions and trials that they had to face, and that lasting legacy. And then as we move through with that, it's also just there need to be more of me capturing these oral histories. There's such a need. And last 2 weeks ago, I was able to sit down and do an interview with Mr. Greg Jacobs, who is also a commissioner for us. And in his story, he talks about a heavy a heavy topic dealing with having to live through segregation, how he was treated differently in his community, then shifting from that experience of being in segregation, moving into integrated schools, and then coming out on the other side of that. And he's serving in his first role, his first time when he held the position of the tribal administrator for the Coharie tribe. And how he was going out in community to try to build these collaborations and, community relationships because that's so important, and how he was turned down. They didn't want to associate with them. It was, dealing with that discrimination in his life. And then now, in his second time serving as tribal administrator, how he gets to see here and reflect on how those experiences impacted his life. And now sitting on the commission, and how he's in those spaces that were once denied, and he's creating the opportunities. And so when we think about, the impact of this oral history project, I always say it's an honor. It's an honor to be in this position, but it's an honor to sit behind the camera, to be able to hit record and sit here and listen to the stories that they are sharing with us. I mean, and they are heavy, and some people are, sometimes they're speaking their truth for the first time, and you're capturing that raw emotion, that processing of that moment, and then, what they've carried with them for so many years. And so how do we be prepared for that? And how do we handle that? And it's also a truth of it, this project is giving them a voice to share out, and also to still bridge that gap with our youth or those in community who didn't even know that this was happening, or those who may have thought that this was not something that was happening in our area. And so as we move forward with this project, and we're talking about how we interact with our elders and we give them this platform, um, these are the authentic reactions. And, it's hard for them to share. And it's also just, it's hard for us to, it's hard to process, as we've heard in these clips before, of how people were shut down for opportunities and how they were treated. And so I hope that with this month being Native American Heritage Month, and with highlighting this project, highlighting these clips, I hope you follow along with the stories that are being shared, and you really listen and, process that as we start to share this with our community and hear more the full story of Mr. Greg as it comes along, but really engage with this work and the importance it is behind it, the meaning, and the power it holds by standing in this truth from each of the people we interview with their own narrative being shared. Thank you.
And thank you. And I wanted to jump in here with a brief word on accessibility. First, I'd like to point out I wouldn't be a good podcaster if I didn't do this twice. Plug the show again. This collection underpins a series of episodes that we did on American Indian education in North Carolina for the podcast. And here's that QR code one more time for you all to scan. I'm sure you have, and if you haven't, here's a chance for you. And I'm happy to say that most of these interviews are available on the North Carolina Digital Collection, which is available through this QR code. So we've got a lot of links for you to follow along with this, as Micaiah implored you to do, because these stories are very important, and we need to process them not simply within the community, but as North Carolinians entirely. And there is more important work to be done, but don't take our word for it. Instead, listen to Miss Shirley Freeman of the Waccamaw and give you her insights.
I don't know if I can give you any advice. I think I got a comment that would say you well on your way and doing what needs to have been done for hundreds of years. We've got a lot out there, like you and I were talking about this morning, that we don't know anything about. It hasn't been discovered, or if it was discovered, it's not documented. So therefore, I tell our tribal council all the time, we need a paper trail to follow. And if you guys are documenting all that's out there that is a part of who we are, our kids on down the line is going to be able to walk in there and not have to question. Now we have a lot of questions about a lot of things because we don't know. We don't know about it. We don't know how authentic anything is. But now it's coming face to face with us. So what you're doing is so needed. And I can't tell you how to do it because I'm not familiar with all of that. But I know you're on the right track. I know it's needed.
Now, Ms. Freeman is another who has passed since her interviews, but again, her memories live on in her family and friends and in this oral history, where, among other things, she recalls the moment when an ancestral canoe was pulled from Lake Waccamaw, and the whole oral history, and indeed the project, stands as a reminder of her individual experiences and the collective memory connecting us through space and time. And so, with that, we'd like to open up to questions. We've got about 12 minutes worth here, and so I'll put on the screen. We'll open up to questions. We'll get the Francesca on to help us out, but also here is our contact information, just for your information. I'll leave it on this screen while we answer the questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Do y'all have any questions for us today? I don't see any questions yet. As we're waiting for those questions to come in, as they are presenting, we were also putting some stuff in the chat. So you have QR access, and then you also have link access to a lot of the documents, including the digital collection and information about, like the historical marker and whatnot. And also Quinn put in the toolkit link so you can access that. Still don't see any questions yet. But Micaiah, I have a question for you. So how did you get into like oral histories? Did you even know about oral histories before you started? Because I mean, when I started working in the archives, I was really new to it. I started when I was young, and so I was just wondering how you connected with that, and especially with talking with communities within the American Heritage Commission. Like, has that been like, I was listening to you, I can tell how passionate you are. Has it been like a real treat for you to go out and talk with everyone? I know you said it's a huge honor for you, but can you just give us some information about that?
Absolutely. It is a huge honor, and that's what I tell everyone. I'm normally a talker, and so just being able to sit down and be quiet and actually listen, it's really made me appreciate it. But I actually got into this film with like this it field through Carolina Indian Circle back when I was an undergrad at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I had a professor, Sarah Smith, and we were going over the Land Back Abolition Project. And in that project, we had to go to Wilson Library to look through special collections. And my group was doing a project on to the Indigenous relationship with the university. And through that, there really wasn't a lot of information provided about Carolina Indian Circle, and we were celebrating our 50th anniversary coming up. So how did we, I was really focused on like how were we not being represented or any resources being put out there. And so I started the Carolina Indian Circle Archive, which is now being taken over by the undergrads that are there today, and they're continuing the work. The archive's still growing. It's a focus on making it publicly accessible, and it was an amazing experience. And so from that, I'm at Simmons University now pursuing my master's in library science with a concentration in cultural heritage informatics. And this position opened up, and it was sent to me, and it's been a dream. I really wake up, and I tell this to everyone. I wake up every day and I was like, what an honor it is to be able to sit here and capture these stories and take part in this project. Good work, but there needs to be so many more people like me doing this. So it's amazing. It's a dream job, and I'm honored to be here and thankful for Quinn and Curry and all the help with John that has taught me all this training to be able to go out and do this work. I'm grateful.
That's amazing. I love like the whole entire full circle moment, starting undergrad and now you're doing it for a living. I mean, it's so nice to be passionate about what you're doing on a daily basis. That was wonderful. We have another question. We got in the chat. It said, "These stories are so important. Thank you for the work you're doing. I have been following the project and listening to the oral histories for the past few months. What is the plan to extend the program to interview some of the youth after the first round of interviews of the elders?"
Francesca, I can speak to that, or at least start it off. Part of the plan, and especially the NAR grant that we applied for, incorporated working with youth to teach them how to take these oral histories. So not this Saturday, but next Saturday, McKay and I are actually giving our first workshop to something called NCNAYO, and that's the North Carolina Native American Youth Organization. So they have quarterly meetings, and we'll go in, and that'll be our first like foray into involving youth, because we want that intergenerational contact. We want the youngest with the oldest, and that's where the magic happens, so to speak. So that's what we'll be starting that in about a week and a half.
That sounds great. And especially, I know you were talking about how you're creating like a toolkit or a guide on how to do oral histories. This is like a perfect way um, to do that. Have you started that yet? Like, because that's a really big undertaking. So
It is a big undertaking, and so right now it's been creating like a document, and then like everything that pops up for me, it may be an issue for me or something that arises. I've been keeping track of that, and then also, as I'm talking to, some of these elders, there's a little bit of an age gap. So what one may have gone through, the other one may have not. So I'm also creating like based on the years, this person may have endured this, or this person may have lived through this, or their parents may know a little bit about this. And then it's also going to be based on community, because not every community is going to have that same experience of, when you talk about the Duncidians, that's not going to be something that someone from the Lumbee community maybe is familiar with, but they may be familiar with the Battle of Hayes Pond and have a story to share about that. So creating these resources, and that's another piece that I didn't mention, is that when I've started doing interviews, because I do see a gap in someone may mention a piece of information that I don't know, but others may know. So I started doing a pre-interview with some of the people that I sit down to interview, and it kind of gives me a little bit of insight into the information they share. And I mean, it's just a conversation. That's really what it gets down to. But sometimes they'll say something like, "Oh, wow, I haven't heard of this before." And it gives me an opportunity to go back before and do a little bit of additional research, because if I was in the actual interview, I may have glossed over that and missed out on an important conversation I could have really dove deeper into. So what I'm learning for me is something like, if I don't know it, maybe our youth, they might not know it as well. So all of these, as it arises, it comes into teaching our youth as well.
that's lovely. Quinn, your hand is raised.
McKay actually brings up a very good point, and something that is kind of an undercurrent in our work is making sure that when people think of American Indians in North Carolina, they're just not thinking of one monolithic group. Because even between the 8 state recognized tribes, I mean, you're talking about differences in geography, traditions, cultures. It can vary. So by having equity between the tribes and storytelling, you get a piece of the story from each of these tribes and urban Indian organizations around the state. And that's very important to making it more diversified in the way people think about American Indians, because we do get questions. Hey, I didn't think American Indians still existed, but not only do we exist, there are distinct cultures in between the tribal groups in North Carolina.
And you're right, that's so important to like provide that voice for all of the American Indians across and tribes like across the state, because it's very different. And I love hearing that story. It's so important. We need to know that. Like, we need to know about what's happening in our state. That's what we're here for, to provide that cultural significance of everyone who lives here. So we have like 4 more minutes. I do have another question. Appreciate you sharing all this information. I've never heard of an urban Indian organization. Can you describe what this is? Thank you.
I'll defer to Curry if you want to answer that. But basically, so they're essentially catch-alls, and they in North Carolina there's actually a statutory recognition process. So you can't just claim to be of you can claim to be from Indian descent, but as far as like that legacy of a tribe and the combined history of a tribe for people, there's a law set up for how you get recognized in the state. So essentially, urban Indian organizations have the same level of recognition as tribal communities like the Lumbee, the Meherrin, Coharie, Waccamaw, and it's really, I say catch-all because they're in urban areas. So you have Fayetteville, Charlotte, it's really Guilford and the surrounding counties, but basically Greensboro, and then Triangle Native is all of the Triangle. So you have Indians that are not only from these 8 state recognized tribes, but everywhere. If you think about Cumberland County and the Cumberland County Association for Indian People, you got major military bases there. So not only are you getting North Carolina Indians, you're getting some, Navajos from out west. You're getting other tribes, and I'll actually open the floor. That's how Curry's parents met. His dad was Sioux, and he was an army man, and he came down to Fort Bragg, and he met Curry's mother, a Lumbee woman, down in Pembroke when he was visiting off base with some other Indians. So that legacy is definitely there for the urban Indian organizations, and we take great pride in them as well.
For some Native and Metrolina in Charlotte, a lot of Indians relocated to the urban areas where they could find jobs. And organizations like Triangle Native, people relocated here because of education and other job opportunities. They would like the area, so they ended up staying here. And like Quinn said, Cumberland County has a diversity of tribal groups that now call that area home or live there partially part of their time because they've relocated there with the military. And we've had a number of, not only in the Lumbee community with soldiers marrying women from the Lumbee community, but other communities as well, because they've had other tribal groups who've relocated to a federal area because of jobs and educational opportunities as well. So a lot of our urban areas exist with tribal groups because people have relocated and they wanted to establish their own Indian community or their all Indian identity. And so today we have Indian education programs in those areas that help the young students meet other Indians who are in that area as well.
Thank you so much for answering that. I know it's 1 o'clock now, so I guess we are at the end of our program. I don't see any other questions. Someone did put in the not text message, but chat that more than 80% of all Indigenous people live in urban communities. So there's a fact
Yes.
there.
Absolutely. And Guilford Native is actually celebrating their 50th year anniversary this year, and they're having a gala in December to mark that occasion. So I'm sure they would be happy to send out information about that. You can certainly probably find that on our website as well.
And just to add,
oh, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, just to add, we interviewed 2 individuals from the beginning, from the ground floor of that, and the Thurman
Lowry,
they're Thurman Lowry and
Francis Stewart Lowry.
Francis. I was looking for Francis. I appreciate that, Curry. Francis Stewart, like they are part of the collection and will be posted on digital collections if they have not been. I think that's coming up soon.
And Francesca, what I was going to say is that last person who commented, Jennifer Revels Baxter, is our commissioner from Guilford Native. So we're happy to have her.
And I think she put the link for Guilford Native on the chat.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll let y'all wrap up and hand the mic back to y'all.
Well, I appreciate the time, and this has been a great discussion, and thanks to everybody for joining in. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for
yeah.
being here. We love Micaiah. We love our oral history project, and we look forward to expanding it even larger and have more people interviewed.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Y'all have a good day.
Yeah, and look forward to more events as the month progresses.